else?
Good day.
Yes, and a beautiful day it is. So we'll thank everyone. We've got a few other people coming. They'll be a little bit late. My partner, as I told you, is away. He is competing in Russia in water polo. And so today we'll be talking about be it resolved, the nuclear deal with Iran will cause more good than bad. Speaking first, who is for the resolution, will be, it's Irshad Ghaznavian. And, stop it. Irshad is a mechanical engineer with an MS degree from the University of Tehran, with over 18 years experience in different industries, 13 of those being in oil and gas. He has lived in Calgary with his family since 2008 and is currently working for as engineering manager for a global oil and gas service company. Irshad is interested and active in community building and social activities. He is a member of the board of and the former president of the Iranian Cultural Society of Canada. And I ask him to now, I will now give him the mic.
Hello everybody, and thank you for coming. First of all, I'm no speaker. I'm not a good speaker, so I was invited here to speak as an individual. I'm not representing my community or my country or any other party. Before we start to talk about the achievements of this deal, which I think was a good deal, I want to talk about a few attributes of the deal. Basically, a good deal is a win-win deal. And a win-win scenario is not that both parties gain 100% of what they want, because otherwise the other party would get 0%. So a success of a deal cannot be guaranteed if one side of the deal feels loser. So this is a very important fact and a basis that I think all the powers in the negotiations, the 6 superpowers in Iran, agreed upon, that a deal is not gaining them the maximum of their desires. John Kerry actually had a very interesting, statement. He said a true measure of this deal is not to meet the desire of one party at the expense of the other. So that was the basis that I think everybody agreed upon. So they started a very respectful negotiations to reach to a peaceful deal, a deal that can bring good things to the world. The other aspect was this deal, this is very important to understand, this deal was only about the nuclear issue. It wasn't about resolving all the crisis in Middle East, in Israel-Palestine issue or any other thing. It was specifically and only about nuclear deal. It was very important. 6 superpowers of the world was sitting in one side and the other country in the other side. 6 superpowers, and they are not stupid. So if we believe that they didn't know their job, or they were easy taking on Iran or anything like that, it's not correct. So we have to trust that when we say 6 superpowers of the world, they are competent enough to enter to negotiations and get the maximum that they want. So, talking about the achievements of this deal, 24 months of tough negotiations happened and achieved things that decades of animosity and aggression and conflict couldn't achieve. And what are those achievements? I just remind you about the history of these negotiations. This crisis started like in 2002 or 2001. So almost 15 years of negotiations and talks.
Sorry, folks, just give me a second here. We're just going to figure this out.
So for United States, was it the best deal that United States could get? Of course not. Was it the best deal for Iran? Absolutely not. In 2005, Iran offered a better deal to United States, a better deal that would limit Iran's number of centrifuges to only a few hundreds. But US turned down that offer, and after 10 years, now Iran has had 19,000 centrifuges. This deal, what it could do was, first of all, stop the further development of the program, stop the further increase of the centrifuges, and in fact, going backwards, reducing the number of centrifuges from 19,000 down to a few hundreds again. 6,000 again. So it wasn't the best deal for US, but it's better than no deal. I can explain why. Because when US turned down several offers one after each other, what Iran did, they went underground. They started to develop the program further and further. They increased the number of centrifuges. They increased the quality of the centrifuges. They started with first generation, and currently they have the 8th generation of high speed, high efficiency centrifuge that could develop further uranium. So the first goal that US defined was Iran's nuke issue is the biggest crisis for US national security and its allies, specifically Israel. So they defined it as the first goal to stop this. It wasn't about any other aspects of the conflict with a country like Iran. So with this mindset, they went into the negotiations and could achieve things that I can address here quickly. So Iran reduces the number of centrifuges, as I said, from 19,000 down to 6,000. Iran stops the enrichment of the uranium to higher levels, anything higher than 3.5%. They had already reached to 20% enrichment and had plans to go to 90% in a few years. So now it's limited to 3.5%. They had a facility in Iraq for heavy water which could produce plutonium. Now that facility is upgraded or redesigned so that there is no plutonium byproduct out of that facility. So there is no weapon-grade plutonium can be created or produced in that facility. They had an underground facility in Fordo with several thousands of centrifuges. Now that facility is being converted into a modern physics research facility rather than being an enrichment facility. Iran agrees to provide unlimited and round-the-clock access to IAEA inspectors to visit anywhere they want, anytime they want. And in fact, right now, there are monitors and cameras of IAEA installed in all the facilities of Iran to monitor the activities. Beyond that, Iran agreed to provide access to inspectors to inspect the military facilities to ensure that there is no nuclear weapon program in those facilities. And this is beyond the international commitments, beyond the NPT, and beyond the NPT non-mandatory inspection regimes. So, before this deal, Iran had only 2 months to produce enough uranium to build the first nuclear bomb. With these inspections in place, with these limitations, reductions, and etc., that time is increased to 1 year. If for any reason Iran decides to deviate from this agreement and break the deal, it takes 1 year for the international community to, get the signal and take the necessary action. Isn't this a good deal? Another thing is that the main reason that Iran was brought to the table was sanctions. Economic sanctions that were crippling Iran's industry and affected the daily life of the people. Now, with this particular deal, it's not that those sanctions are all removed. They can snap back as soon as the international community realizes that Iran is deviating, so they can put the pressure and maintain the pressure. I believe this is a good deal for U.S. because the outcome of this negotiation for U.S. was great. They could reunite the international community, the international community that was divided over Iraq's war. They could bring in to the same side Russia and China. Then they agreed to the deal, which guarantees the success of the deal. Otherwise, you saw what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan, where half of the international community was against the war. U.S. resolved the biggest threat to its national security without entering a war, and that is unprecedented. Before, it was only happened during President Kennedy when they resolved the Cuban missile issues, right? This is the second incident since that time. U.S., what they could do was to block the three pathways that could lead Iran to a nuclear weapons program, and those three pathways are all blocked. Without a deal, they were all open. Iran could start and develop further. Some people who are against this deal, they say this deal doesn't provide enough security for Israel as the biggest ally of United States, but that's not true, because with Iran setting aside the nuclear program, it provides more security for Israel. There is no other country other than Israel in Middle East who possesses the nuclear weapons, right? Israel can still be the first and only country in Middle East possessing nuclear weapons without being part of the NPT or any other international regulations or monitoring regimes or anything like that. So one competition is off the table. As I said, the program, nuclear program of Iran towards building a bomb is delayed to 1 year, not 2 months. And the fact is, Iran, as the biggest enemy of Israel in Middle East, is now going to be busy with internal affairs to rebuild the economy, to renovate the old industries, oil and gas industries, and it's going to be busy with other stuff, internal stuff, other than going outside and creating trouble for the others. It's good for Middle East. This deal is good for Middle East because it stops the nuclear contest. Without this deal, the Arab nations around the Persian Gulf would be convinced to pursue their own program, own nuclear program. And with this deal, they stop. Now there is no excuse for them. There is no enemy other side of the Gulf that provides the reason for them to seek the program. With this deal, Iran has learned that they can achieve more with negotiations and being engaged with the international community rather than confrontation. So they have already started the talks with the Arab nations around the Persian Gulf to focus on the common issues in the Middle East, common threats like extremism, like terrorism, like ISIS. They have already started that negotiation. So it's good for Middle East too. It's good for Iran because with the sanctions being removed, they can attract foreign investment, they can rebuild the industry, they can renovate the oil and gas, and they can be more engaged with the international community in all aspects of the financial, economy, culture, etc. From foreign policy perspective, it's good for Iran because they have established themselves as a power, a regional power in Middle East. They sat across the table with 6 superpowers, so which gives them the confidence to be more involved in the international dialogue, international cooperation with other countries. And it's good because they still maintained the technology, they maintained the know-how, like other countries like Argentina or South Korea when they started the nuclear program. Because of the international pressure, they set aside, they dismantled the facilities, but Iran can still maintain the facilities, maintain the know-how, but operate them within a limited band. Yeah, that's pretty much it. But the main important thing is in today's world, we have several crises and issues. One less issue is good for the world. If I tell you that the ISIS issue is resolved, you say it's a good thing. Iran's deal is resolving one issue and it's good for the international community and the whole world. Thank you. No, it's fine. It's fine.
No, good timing. Believe me, I'll let you guys know when you go over too long. We have lots of time today. Well, thank you very much. That was very interesting. Now I seem to have lost my paper. Found it. Like I don't know this guy. Okay, so our second speaker, who is opposed to the nuclear deal, is Merle Terleski. Merle has been an active participant in Speaker's Corner almost since its inception as a resident of Calgary, and he says he's very aware of the issues concerning the Middle East politics and how it affects Israel and the rest of the world. I can't read my own writing, sorry. He has traveled across the US, Nicaragua, and the former USSR, where he studied international affairs for 3 months at Moscow's Polytech Institute. He is active in politics on a civic, provincial, and federal level. Merle was active in left-wing politics as a teen and shifted to conservative politics as he grew older. And he has worked on the campaigns of a few different politicians here in Alberta as well. And I now give the mic to Merle.
Yeah, no, I'll put it there to make it easier holding notes. Yeah, election's upon us, as we all know. They just dropped the writ today, so it's going to be busy. Thanks, Irshad, for coming out, as they say in your native tongue, salam, and to your wife and everyone else who came out today. We really appreciate it on a long weekend. You know, today we face an issue of nuclear weapons in a... Too loud? Okay. I'm also pretty close to the mic, so... Thank you. Today we certainly face an issue that not only faces us here in Calgary, but the citizens of the world. And that is really the Iranian nuclear deal. First of all, I don't want to sit here and say to you that I'm a great advocate of nuclear weapons. The reality is they exist. About eight or so different countries have nuclear weapons right now. So really what we're looking at is how to monitor and how to keep these things safe so that really no one ever uses them. Because the only other 2 times in history that they were used was just recently into this date, but back 70 years, was in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which instantly left 7,000 people dead. That's just the dead. Never mind the other ramifications of burns and such. So nuclear weapons are really not a good thing at all to have, but they exist and we have to monitor them. So I'm going to deal with this in 2 separate areas. First of all, I'd like to talk a little bit about the deal. I take you back to the days of Reagan and Gorbachev when they were reducing chemical weapons, nuclear weapon stockpiles between Russia and the United States. And Reagan turned over to Gorbachev during one of the last meetings and he said to him in Russian, "Dobya Nabrovya." And Gorbachev let off a big smile and he says, "You always say that." And that is Russian for trust but verify. Trust but verify. You know, when your own mother sends you to your room when you're a kid and says, "Johnny, go clean your room," there's probably no doubt within a half hour or 45 minutes later, she's going to come by, not because she doesn't trust you, but she wants to verify that you actually did what you said you were going to do. Instead of going playing out in the park, she wants to verify that you cleaned your room. Nothing wrong with that. And so that same type of verification needs to exist when it comes to nuclear weapons and nuclear stockpiles. My friend Irshad said that there was immediate inspection. In fact, from my understanding, that isn't the case. Senator John Kerry was in front of the Senate committee just last week and was left babbling and silent when the senator asked him, "Can you please tell me if there are going to be anytime, anywhere verification?" And he said, in fact, according to an article I read in The Economist, going through the United Nations and the other committees that Iran sits on, it could take up to 60 days to look at some of the sites that are controlled by Iran. Not all of them, but some of them it could take up to 60 days. I don't need to tell you, if someone was coming to find drugs in your house and you had 60 days to get rid of them, you'd probably be okay. So that's quite a long time. Really, what does this deal mean to the world? And I think former Foreign Minister of Israel, Ms. Levini, who's actually on the left in Israel, said it quite well. She said, "It's hard to deny the strategic and regional impact of legitimizing Iran's status as a nuclear threshold state and allowing it to be empowered both financially and militarily, while it continues its aggression and sponsorship of terror throughout the region." I think she nailed that right on there. So what does the deal mean? Well, really what they've done, and I think Rashad kind of hinted at it, they've contained Iran, is what they've done. They've contained them to the year 2020. After 2020, it's really hard to say what's going to happen. The former Canadian ambassador to the United States puts it well when he says, on the issue of inspections, he says, "Anytime, anywhere has morphed into where necessary, when necessary, or some places, sometimes. So-called snapback provisions in the event of any breach are subject to UN Security Council approval, and where continued support from Russia and China is anything but assured." So, you know, there is the snapback, but even the snapback is not something immediate. The deal as well continues that, as I said, they do lower the centrifuges, but they still will have centrifugability. As a prize given to Iran by the United States for signing this deal, they were given billions of dollars in financial relief. The problem with that relief is Iran still has not come out and relinquished or acquiesced its support for terror organizations like Hezbollah. So what is Iran going to do with... Freedom fighter. Well, you can tell that about Mr. Samir Kuntar, who is a hero in Syria and Iran when he bashed a 3-year-old Israeli skull in with a rifle butt. You have his picture all over. So that's not, to me, is not really a freedom fighter when you kill a load. But anyhow, we'll deal with that later. So Iran is being given billions of dollars in relief from sanctions, and it's not really quite clear what they're going to do with that money. There was celebration in Iran, that is true. In the article here from The Economist, in the hotel where some of the negotiations were going on, at the end there was the fellow who does the door at the hotel says, "This is wonderful," he says. "The new embassy from the United States is going to open in Tehran." He says, "Mr. Obama will be in Tehran very soon to visit." And, you know, there was jubilation on the streets of Iran, and that's a good thing. I'm not so sure if Obama will be flying into Tehran anytime soon or opening an embassy like they just did in Cuba. But if it is a beginning to that, that's great. I just don't see that happening right away. And why don't I see that happening right away? And I don't blame this on the Iranian people, but we have to be clear, the leadership in Iran. Because only days after the deal was signed, Rouhani, the new president of Iran, was quoted as saying, "Death to Israel," yet again at Friday prayers. And everyone joined in. Death to Israel, death to the United States. Now, it's always a debate as to what it really means in Farsi and what it really means in English. And I was asking Rashad earlier about this word, nabudi, which is Farsi for annihilation. And as recently as of today, a book was written and published, it's coming out in English, by Mr. Khamenei. And again, he calls for the annihilation of Israel. Now, I don't know. If I had a neighbor that was continually saying, "I want to annihilate you, I want to kill you," over and over, sooner or later I think I would pick up the phone and dial 911. But the 911 in this case is the United Nations. And what does that really mean when it comes to threats against Israel? And I'll deal with that in a minute. So we really have a deal that isn't really monitored very well. Senator Kerry couldn't answer in questioning as to anytime, anywhere sanctions. He fumbled it like he had Tourette's or something. He couldn't answer the question. And the reason he couldn't answer the question is because there are no anytime, anywhere inspections for the sites. As I said, confirmed by The Economist, it could take up to 60 days to finally get into those sites. So while this deal does contain Iran, I think that's a good thing. It really leaves it to another president to deal with when we get to 2020. So part 2 of my submission is going to be, what are the ramifications of this deal when it comes to the Middle East? Well, first and foremost, and I think Rashad realizes this as well, as he said, it affects the entire Middle East if this country is ever allowed to have a nuclear weapon or anything close to it. I don't believe for a minute that Iran is ever going to strap an IBM to a missile and fire it over to Israel. It would be far too obvious, and it would be immediate annihilation for their entire population. However, the possibility exists of somehow some of that yellow cake getting into the hands of people in Hezbollah, carrying it across the Golan Heights and dropping it there. It wouldn't take much. It would take enough for you to be able to carry in your pack sack of yellow cake uranium. And if they made basically what you call a dirty bomb. It's not on the end of an ICBM missile. It's not fired from a plane. It's in a pack sack. We saw what was done in Boston, ladies and gentlemen, just from a pressure cooker. Can you imagine a dirty bomb set off in Tel Aviv with uranium that was spread all across from Israel into Iran? It would be terrible.
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
Well, you can joke all you want, my friend. Go talk to the people, survivors of Hiroshima, and ask them how it was like to get nuked. So, anyhow, that is a worry that a dirty bomb could be carried in. The second thing is, and again, I don't put this onto the people of Iran, but until Iran gives up this territorial nonsense of yelling death to Israel, death to the United States, I really don't think their government can be trusted. I think there must be complete verification until they come into the community of nations and realize that Israel is a UN member, just like Iran is. It's funny when you watch the Olympics. Iran walks in, and right after the Iranian delegation on the Summer Olympics, in walks Israel. It's the only time that they ever get that close to each other, is at the Summer Olympics. And we wish that could be a more usual thing, but it's not. So what's the solution? Well, I think when it comes to Israel, I think they have every right to be cautious. I think the history throughout the United Nations and the Second World War gives Israel every right to be cautious. I do not think it is fair or legitimate to ask Israel to hedge their bets, to roll the dice, to trust the mullahs. Because what happened, ladies and gentlemen, in Europe in the Second World War? When that crazy madman got up and everyone thought, this guy's nuts, when he says, solve the Jewish question. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, when Adolf Hitler got up, he never talked about gas chambers. He never talked about extermination. He just said the Jewish question. Well, we know what he meant later by the Jewish question, because 6 million people died. So pardon me if today Israel is not allowing the existence of their country to be put into the hands of anyone else but themselves. Because when it comes down to it, Europe dropped the ball on this one. Nothing was done. Nothing, no train tracks leading to the concentration camps are bombed, nothing. So Israel is not going to sit back and let the possibility of Iran having a nuclear weapon exist. So they are demanding some more verifications. What Israel does with this in the future, I'm really not entirely sure what their response will be. They can't entirely wipe out Iran's nuclear stockpiles. They don't have the biggest bombs to be able to do it. Only America could do that. They could do some damage. So I think Israel shouldn't be expected to simply trust Iran. I don't need to tell you what Iran has done worldwide. If you go onto Wikipedia and look up terror in Iran, and again I talk about their support for Hezbollah and the support in the Revolutionary Guard, the bombing of the Lebanon military barracks and the Marines. So again, the deal was signed, and with less than 24 hours later, you have the mullahs saying the stuff that they're saying. So you really raise it, which side do you take? I mean, the moderate. This guy's supposed to be the moderate in Iran, and he's saying death to Israel. I'd like to see what the extreme side would be saying if the moderate is saying death to Israel. Historically, Iran was not always an enemy of Israel. Prior to the Islamic Revolution in Iran, there was friendship under the Shah. Not that the Shah was the best thing in the world, but there was, even prior to the Shah, there was friendship between Israel and Iran. I think one day maybe that friendship can return, but there must be an equal accommodation for both countries to exist and acceptance of their existence. Just a few days ago, and I found it on Google today, Khamenei put out a book about how to take over Israel. Now he says he really doesn't mean annihilation of the Jews. He says he wants Jerusalem back. He will slowly make Israel so tired that all the Jews will just want to go back to Europe and Canada and the United States, and he'll take over. Again, you want to take him at his word? Go ahead. I particularly don't. We know what happened to a Canadian journalist when all she did in Iran was take a few photos. They cracked her skull open and she died in prison. Hence Harper's reasons for his refusal to lift embargoes against Iran or open up the embassy. That's what they did to a Canadian journalist. So I really just don't think they can be trusted. One day, maybe they can. Is there hope? There's always hope. We got an embassy in Washington now for Cuba, and there's one in Havana. Things have changed. No one ever thought that would happen in 50 years. There was a little blip on the news, but ladies and gentlemen, it was a pretty big deal if you consider what we went back to and what Rashad mentioned in 1962. 1962 was a huge issue, ladies and gentlemen. We had a small little country named Cuba with actual operational nuclear weapons, only 90 miles from Miami. And I don't need to tell you what would have happened if they fired one of those at Miami. I can tell you what Khrushchev said to Fidel Castro in the documents at the Kennedy Center. When Fidel Castro said to Khrushchev, I want full operational command and I may have to use them. He said, you're out of your mind. He says, that will never happen. I am not going to sacrifice 500 million Soviet citizens so you can have control of these weapons. Even Khrushchev, who banged his shoe on the podium and said the end of the United States, knew what it would mean if you put nuclear weapons into the hands of a man like Fidel Castro. Even Khrushchev knew that you could never really use these weapons. That's why he turned his boats around, took the weapons, and went back to the Soviet Union. Even then, he knew it was a ploy. They're going to put the weapons there. They're going to scare the Americans, and in the end, the Americans took the weapons out of Turkey. So you could almost say it worked. But you know, who knows? Maybe they could have got a little excited, and Cuba took over one of those missiles and fired one at Miami. We're not talking about slingshots here, ladies and gentlemen. We're not talking about throwing rocks. We're talking about nuclear weapons. And as I said, when they dropped it on Hiroshima, it was an instant 100,000 people dead. So you really can't fool around and let a country that yells death to another UN member have control over these. So really, I guess when it comes down to it, I think the fact that Kerry fumbled on the Senate questioning about anytime, anywhere inspection speaks volumes. He did fumble. I watched it. He couldn't answer the question of anytime, anywhere inspection. So I think that's important. I think it's an issue of Iran coming back into the community of nations as a trusted nation, as a nation that respects human rights, which they don't now. You know, hanging can be really quick when you hang someone, but in Iran they don't do it like that. They have a crane and they hoist the guy up and he swithers and swathers in the air until he chokes to death. That's how they hang homosexuals in Iran. So, you know, the Muda government has to be changed. We hope one day that Iran will enter back into the UN as a member nation that respects human rights. So until then, I think we have to watch. The President of the United States in 2020 will have to relook the issue, because they have not ended, and I'll end with this, they have not ended Iran's drive to nuclear weapons. They have only stopped it for a short time. It's a big Band-Aid, but sooner or later that Band-Aid has to be pulled off and the same problem will exist. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Merle. And Rashad, did you have any rebuttal that you'd like to make? Okay.
First of all, I clarify one more thing that I forgot. I'm not a pro-regime in Iran. Actually, I'm criticizing the policies of Iranian regime. One reason I immigrated to Canada was because I was not agreeing with the policies they implemented, human rights, and so many other stuff. But one thing that I clarified in the beginning was, let's separate Iranian nuclear issue with the other things, because this deal was specifically addressing the nuke issue, not human rights, not all the threats in the world, not all the conflicts in the Middle East, and not specifically Israel-Palestine crisis. So the way I saw Merle was describing the things was exactly from the viewport of Mr. Netanyahu and hardliner Israelis. They see this problem too simplistically. The issue is more complicated than that. Iran building the bomb in 2 months, ship it to Hezbollah and dropping it into Israel. It's not that simple. It's exactly like the cartoon that Netanyahu showed in the UN, which was, sorry, but ridiculous. It's not that too simplistic. You mentioned about the millions of dollars that US or others are giving to Iran. It's basically Iran's own money, which is in European banks blocked because of the sanction. They cannot transfer the oil money to their own pocket. That's it. It's not any sort of aid or any incentive. It's Iran owns money. The deal is not about Hezbollah. It's not about crisis. I clarified that. And that 60 days that you mentioned about the inspections. Inspections are around the clock. Every second they want, they can do the inspection. What they cannot do immediately is the non-mandatory inspections, which are beyond the NPT and beyond the international regulations. No other country in the world, including Israel, United States, allow those kind of inspections without prior arrangements. Those are non-mandatory inspections. The inspections that Iran had agreed already, and they are listed down very clearly in 150 pages of this deal, is specific, is immediate, and in fact, it's been started a year ago, not after this deal. It's been started on a voluntary basis a year ago after Geneva Agreement.
Thank you. Sure, Carl, go ahead.
And Irshad, I certainly didn't want to imply at all, Irshad, that you're a supporter or such of the multi-theocracy. I mean, I don't take that from you, so I apologize if that came that I was trying to say Irshad is, because he isn't. Let me just really quickly read from The Economist on with regard to the sanctions, inspections. If there are allegations that Iran is cheating, the Joint Commission will seek to resolve the dispute for 30 days. If that effort fails, it will be referred to the UN Security Council, which will have to vote to consider sanction relief. A veto by a permanent member will therefore mean that sanctions are reimposed. The whole process will take 65 days. I would disagree on whether, okay, you may not like the little cartoon that Netanyahu used at the UN. I would disagree, though, that it's not possible to sneak in a dirty bomb. It is possible. They could put it in a pack sack and carry it into... It has to be created first, and the question is whether or not, what Netanyahu's concern was, is are they at that stage now where they can create it? He's not entirely sure, the world isn't entirely sure. Kim Jong-un of North Korea says he has a nuke. We don't know if that means he just has a whole bunch of TNT that he's blowing up in the ground. And I guess, and you're right, and I'll finish with this, Irshad, you can't solve all the issues in one negotiation, but it does have to do with Hezbollah. I'm sorry, it does, because they openly, categorically support Hezbollah. And I'm sorry, I believe if they could get some things into the hands of Hezbollah, I believe they would, and I believe they would use them. I think the historical record is there of like guys of Samir Kuntar, who was just actually killed in Syria because the Israelis got him in the Golden Heights. But Samir Kuntar is not a nice person. Look up his bio and what he did, and they call him a hero in the streets of Tehran. So. Well, what part of Hezbollah? I mean, that's like, Hamas doing charity work in Gaza, and there's a nice side of Hamas and the bad side of Hamas. It's either a terror group, like the entire EU sees them as, not just Canada, the entire EU sees Hezbollah and Hamas as terror organizations. So it's not just a U.S. doctrine issue. The entire EU says that. I just think there needs to be more trust and more verification. In order for there to be trust, there needs to be more verification, and there just isn't that. And I guess we'll see, but ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about a nuke here. We're talking about a dirty bomb. And, I don't want to be the one to have to come back and say I told you so, because I don't think any population wants that. But thanks, Irshad.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. That was very enlightening on both sides. Learned a few new things. Does anyone have any questions or comments to make? This here is our open mic portion. If we could just get people to line up over here by the left speaker. Ma'am, we'll start with you, because we know you came out to hear the speakers.
How will this nuclear deal impact or resolve or affect the sectarian issues between the Shiites and the Sunnis?
It will not. It will not. It's not about that. It's not. But it helps. It helps because I mentioned briefly in my, speaking that this was a big lesson for Iran and the rest of the world, that the issues can be resolved through negotiations and conversation. It was a big deal. It was a big deal for the whole world. And I'm hoping that this is just a step forward towards encouraging more negotiations, more conversations, and peaceful, resolution to all the conflicts. But if you expect a nuke deal to resolve the Shia-Sunni conflict, it will not.
Thank
I have
you.
no response. I agree with them. I agree with Irshad's answer.
Hi, my name is Aaron. I'll try to be quick, but I'll try to be quick.
No, you won't. I'm doing the same thing you gave it
Twice. So anyway, I want to talk about immune systems. We have a biological immune system that we developed through biology and evolution. We also have a cultural immune system. And our cultural immune system has created an immunity to the debauchery and criminality that we faced in the imperialist West. We have a threshold here, and we're underneath that. So anything that happens, say for instance, Harper, who has signed the quote-unquote Fair Election Act that keeps over 1 million Canadians from the voting booth to try to rig the elections so that it favors the Conservatives. That's kind of below we accept it, because it's all about the bad people over there. Well, brothers and sisters, capitalism is not a moral production that creates boogeymen over there and creates nice white people over here. It's a mode of production that creates a division between workers and owners. It monopolizes capital and it forces companies to expand. And what we're dealing with now is a resistance to that expansion, a resistance to the United Nations system of accounts. So when Iran is forced to follow the dictates of the policemen of the world, this is an egregious affront to democracy. This is an egregious affront to the United Nations, who believes in sovereignty of the countries that are out there, and not this ridiculous idea of right to protect, the right to go in and imperialize and dictate and say you must follow the system of the United Nations system of accounts, which essentially is capitalism. Iran has a right to have a nuclear weapon if they want. Israel has one. So, I mean, Syria, Iran, North Korea, whatever you think about the moral standings of these countries have a right to eke out a different path than what is dictated by the imperialist countries.
Sure, Carol, I'll give it to you.
Aaron, I got to give it to Aaron. I used to think like Aaron when I was 17 years old, involved with the socialists, that only the capitalists can do things wrong. It was Joseph Stalin who actually killed even more people than Hitler did when he starved. Hold on, I didn't mock you while you're talking. It was Joseph Stalin who killed 300 million of his own people. His entire leadership he had executed. It was Joseph Stalin under the vanguard of the Workers' Party and the hammer and sickle that killed millions and millions of people. And Aaron, if you want to take the chance, just remember that the Iranian theocracy doesn't just hate Israel. The big Satan is the United States. And if they were ever able to actually fire a nuclear missile at the United States, don't think that you're not downwind from it, because you are. And the wind, well, it's true. If they fire a nuke, I know it, but don't think you're not downwind from it. It will affect us. And if by your reasoning, we really shouldn't have gone after Adolf Hitler. I mean, he has a right to arm himself. He has a right to, we should have trusted him. Well, we saw what happened when we trusted him, when Chamberlain trusted him. He moved into Czechoslovakia, moved into Poland, took over all of Europe. You're willing to roll the dice on some idea that only capitalism is bad and the mullahs can do no good? I'm not willing to do that. I don't know if you want to respond.
That does not follow, and you know it. Oh, sure it does.
I don't want to enter into this comparison between communism or capitalism or that kind of stuff, but you mentioned the interesting thing. It's about we have international regulations, laws, United Nations, NPTs, all sort of different international mechanisms that is meant to provide equality of the rights between all the nations. What you just mentioned, I think, is right, because it's like we are treating different countries with different standards. Like Israel, who is claiming that Iran is threatening us, so we are protecting ourselves, etc. They already have a nuclear bomb. They're not claiming it. They're not providing access to any international society or etc. But they are treated like a safe place, and without any, nobody is creating problem for them. Or let's say, Iran is always being accused to support the terrorism, but ask different people, random people, who are the biggest terrorism movements today in the world? ISIS. Before that, Al-Qaeda. Before that, now Al-Shabaab. al-Nusra. They are Muslims, but they are Sunni Muslims supported by Saudi Arabia, supported by Qatar, not Iran. But the media, United States, because they are allies with some other countries, they are diverting the attention towards another enemy, Iran. Hezbollah, of course, I'm not agreeing with Hezbollah's action, but they call themselves as a resistance force. They are protecting their own land, their own people against an injustice in Lebanon. Hamas, the same thing in Palestine. So it's not about ISIS who goes and kills people in other countries, or Al-Qaeda who bombs the United States. And these allegations of Iran bombing United States, seriously, Iran never started a war in the past 10 centuries, never attacked any other country in the past 20 centuries. So what's the threat?
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. And the next gentleman here.
Thank you, everybody. I'm Roman. First of all, allow me to say, I love this country. I love Canada. I've been here for the past 8 years. Here we are all, sitting here free, can drink a beer at home, do whatever you want, walk, the girls can walk, sleeveless. Nobody gonna, topless in some places, nobody gonna stone us, nobody gonna hang us. Gay people have their gay parades, everything is cool. Now, in 1979, Iran's it wasn't quite a democracy, but it was quite a Western regime. It was abducted by, in a very similar move as what happened in the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. It was abducted by the Ayatollah's regime, and the first thing they said, it's death to America, death to Israel. A few weeks ago, just right after they signed the deal with the UN and the leaders of the free world, they've done the same thing on the streets. They burned American flags, they burned Israel flags, and they all chanted, death to Israel, death to America. Now my question for the gentlemen here, I don't know your name. Hirshad? Hirshad, Roman. I know that most of the people, the Iranian that live in Canada, they love the secular, they love the pluralist, they love the democracy. Most of them, they're very far from fanatic Islam. That's what I noticed. What do you gentlemen think about the fact that we just seen it like 2 weeks ago? Death to Israel, death to America. Everybody's celebrating the biggest deception that just been signed on. The biggest deception since 1939, 38.
Thank you. That was a good question.
Valid point. That's a valid point. Just to tell you my take on that. Iran's population is divided. A small minority of, I can say 10%, some people say 5%, are ruling the nation, right? So those extremists that you see, they burn the flags, they are not ordinary people. They're paid to do that. They're supported by the regime of minority. They have the biggest power and the biggest money. That's why they are ruling the country, but they are not representing the country. Believe me in that. And what you see here in the streets of Canada, here we have like 15,000 Iranians living peacefully, and you can't even notice that they are Iranian, right? The same thing in the streets of Tehran. Right after the deal, the true Iranians, they went on the streets and celebrated. They were dancing because the sanctions would be relieved, they could join the international community, and they can be treated like any other nation in the world, not with humiliation, not with mistreatment, right? That's the real Iran. What you see in the burning flags, those are not actual Iranian regimes. If they are the ones supported by the government.
And I'm going to agree with our shot here. I think the majority of Iranians want peace. I think they want an iPhone like you and I have. Go to Cuba, my friend, and I've been there. What they asked me for electronics. So, they want the same type of lifestyle that we have here. But there is a theocracy that's in power. It's a dangerous theocracy. It's never going to be like it was in the past about identified armies fighting identified armies. That's not how Hezbollah works. It won't be an identified army with an Iranian patch on their shirt going, they'll be sneaking in with something as they've done in the past, and it could possibly kill hundreds of thousands of people. So I think Iran, like Cuba is doing slowly, Iran needs to enter back into the community of nations. They need to stop this ridiculous stuff after prayers. It did stop for a while, and then it kind of came back. And you know, officially, there's something really revolutionary happening in Iran right now, and you can find it on YouTube and Facebook. Iranian women are basically going around taking their hijab off and taking a picture of themselves. How revolutionary. But the idea that they could get caught doing that, they could be beaten by the religious police. But they're going into open fields and markets, taking off their hijab, taking a picture of themselves and putting it on Facebook. And that, they're risking their bodily protection because they could be beaten by religious police. So just that, you know, it's a step forward that women, if you want to wear the hijab, great, but they're saying don't force us to wear it. So you can find that on Facebook.
True, okay. This lady here.
Hi, my name is Michelle. With respect to Israel and Iran, one of the things I think that people should keep in mind is that last year, before the outbreak of hostilities in Gaza, it was just about 3 days after that Iran was supposed to undergo inspections, I believe. And the whole Gaza war completely diverted world attention from that. And there are many pieces of evidence that the hand of Iran is active in Hamas, in Gaza, and so the Hezbollah is operating from the north, Hamas is operating from the south, and these two organizations, I dispute the claim that they are protecting their own homeland or their own people, because in South Lebanon, many of the South Lebanese fought against Hezbollah, tried to get them out, and ended up coming into Israel for protection. And in Gaza, you find that Hamas burned down, for instance, the crazy water park that 5 Palestinian entrepreneurs had put together. So that's against the interests of the people. So I just wanted to point out that this whole conflict in Gaza was actually, in my view, a cover for the fact that Iran did not want to participate in inspections as it had agreed to at that time, and that was just a year ago. So I think that that's a bad sign.
Yeah, you're right. I forgot about that until you mentioned it.
The incidents in Gaza are very unfortunate. As a human being, I'm really sorry to see that innocent people are being died. But correlating an accidental happening, I don't know, in Gaza with something beyond the borders, again, it's too simplistic. It can be as simple as a coincidence. Just to clarify that, Hamas is a Sunni system, power.
But they're being sponsored by Iranians.
No, that's my next point. Hezbollah is Shia, created and funded by Iran. Those are not the same thing. Sometimes they are both fighting against Israel, which is the fact, but the biggest supporter of Hamas is not Iran, it's Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Actually, they are located, their office is located in Qatar. The biggest fund is coming from Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Iran is supporting Hamas against Israel. They provide funding, but what I'm saying is Hamas ideology and actions are not aligned 100% with Iran's policies. Sometimes it's aligned when it comes to fighting against Israel, but they are not the same thing. And as I said, other nations are also supporting Hamas more than Iran.
I'm not going to get into the whole Israeli, but they were actually recently kicked out of Qatar. The leadership, the Hamas leadership, was actually recently meeting in Tehran. They are without a headquarters right now. And Saudi Arabia, and I agree, and Saudi Arabia. No, I know, but the Mashal, who is in exile, has yet to find a new home because he was kicked out of Qatar.
Khalid Mashal, every 1 or 2 years, goes on a tour to get the funding. It goes to all the Middle East. It's not specifically Iran or any other country.
No, he's right. They did, but he was kicked out of Qatar. Where he's going after that, we're not quite sure.
Thank you. You have something to say?
I am really scared. My name is Lance Eagle Speaker. I'm from the Blood Tribe. They're building nuclear weapons down there on my reserve. So I think we all have to be really scared up here. That's all I have to say. Could you guys do a stop? Go down there and do a stop to it?
I think you'll need to talk to your to some of the local politicians. No, that if you don't want to talk to the chief, talk to somebody at City Hall. Talk to the newspapers. That's scary. Okay. Thank you for telling us about that. I'll talk to you about it after, okay? Sir?
All right, thank you very much. My name is Rob. I'd like to thank you both for coming out tonight. Or this afternoon, very passionate, which I appreciate. I think these debates are really important. These debates are very important to have, just because it exposes people to new ideas and new thoughts. And sometimes we read the newspaper headlines and figure that's exactly what reality is, but it's always much more complicated than that. Urshad, was it? I think you made a really good case for your side. I kind of support that as well. I'm a veteran. I've been, sorry, I think you made a very good case on your behalf. Sure, that's not perfect. I'm a veteran. I've been to war. I think it's a terrible thing. We've got to do everything we can to avoid it. One thing you sort of touched on, I just have a quick question for you, is you mentioned before, like the internal politics of Iran. It's a very young demographic. I don't remember the exact numbers, but under 40 is a pretty big demographic. Do you find that younger people want to be engaged with the world to sort of push the Iranian regime to sort of give up some of their more bombastic terms to sort of push them towards this deal just as much as the Americans have as well? And I'll leave just before I say one thing. And I think this is a good start. As far as it's not going to solve every problem, like Sunni Shia. I mean, when we were in Afghanistan, it wasn't the Shia who was funding the Taliban. It wasn't the Shia who was funding ISIS. They're the ones who tend to fight it. So it's a step in the right direction. And back in the day when Nixon went to China, it started off with ping pong balls and panda bears. And that's what diplomacy sort of step up from that. And just your own thoughts, like, did the young demographic want to be part of the 21st century? Is that something that's pushed Iran towards this? Thank you.
That's absolutely correct. That Iran's generation, as he pointed out, like more than 50% of the country is below 35. Right. Very young, below 40, now below 40, because this is statistics for like 4 or 5 years old. So, one of the biggest reasons that Iran was brought to the negotiation table was internal pressure by the younger generation. The regime has understood and realized that they don't have the same power they used to have 20 years ago when they were fighting with Iraq or they were under other crises. The younger generation, they want to be involved in the international society, like what he mentioned. You may think that it's stupid, but they want to have the same right as a kid in Canada have access to the same level of information, high-speed internet, technology, cars, clothing, etc., like any other nation has, right? So what I see just by watching my nephews, my brothers, sisters, neighbors back home is that the younger generation, they're not supporting the regime anymore. And in fact, they're not even supporting the Shia theology. Their beliefs started to fade out. So they are less religion nation than 30 years ago, right? And this movement is going up, and we see the signs. Like during the elections 8-9 years ago, we saw the movement of the younger generation to resist against the regime. What happened in Iran? For example, if they realize that Ayatollah Khamenei is supporting a certain candidate, people go and against to the other person, to the competition, just to be against him. And they realize that. And the biggest reason that they were brought to this table was internal pressure of the younger generation.
And again, I agree with most of what Arshad just said. It was inspirational to see on the streets of Tehran and across Iran the upheavals on the voting. We saw what happened. That young woman, the first demonstration she ever went to, she took a bullet in the chest in front of her father. This is how the regime will respond. And I think it's going to be up to the Iranian people ultimately to get rid of this theocracy. I think any way we can help and support them to do so. I'm not a great supporter of the Shah. I think the United States dropped the ball when they refused to extradite him back to Iran. I think they should have, but they didn't. And that created a lot of bitterness between Iran and the United States. But you know what? If Cuba can get over it, I think perhaps there's hope for Iran. You know, and that the younger generation there that he speaks of. You know, and I'm going to share this with you just really quickly. My last trip to Cuba, it was my third time staying at the same hotel in the Veradero, and I had this velvet jacket I bought from a clothing store downtown here. It cost me $150, and it just kind of went out of fashion, and I gave it to the waiter. I tell you, and I don't want to sound all big materialistic that these things are the most important in life, but they're not. But you know what? His eyes opened up like saucers that I was giving him this jacket. And I said, my man, you're going to pick up the ladies in the bar tonight. And he wore that jacket around the hotel. Like it was the most exciting thing in his life. And I just think it's a little selfish of us to sit here and say, we got access. Whether you want to use the iPhone or not, that's your choice. But you got access to it. They don't even have access to it. Internet is extremely limited in Tehran, even in so much in as you know, it's extremely limited. Yeah, and in Cuba, at least they have access to it. If they don't want to buy the iPhone, they don't have to, but they can have access to it, like we have access to things. That's.
And the embargo. Just a little comment that they do have access to iPhones and technologies and cars, but at expenses. They do have internet but low speed because the government doesn't want to give them access to unlimited source of information and things that they don't agree with. But they do have access to the technology. They do have iPhones. They wear brands, but at expenses.
Okay, thank you. Wow, we've had some really good questions brought up today. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to say? Any more questions? Anything you're not sure about? Gentleman here.
Now I understand that the money that the Iranians couldn't access has now been given back to them, and they're an oil-rich country. What reason would they have to want to have their nuclear program in the first place? Like Hitler. The whole race for the nuclear bomb was happening back when World War II was starting. And, a lot of the people were very concerned if he would get the bomb that it would have escalated the crisis a lot more than it was. So, do you think that they should have let Hitler to, I'm not saying that I think you do, but why should we allow a country that is in upheavals? You're saying there's a lot of reforms happening. It's just not a stable place to be pursuing that kind of thing. They're a lot more vocal in their hate towards Israel and America than Hitler was at the start of his war on the world. So to me, I just see similarities. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are.
The similarities you mentioned about the similarities, there is a distinction between empty threats and actions, right? So Iran said death to Israel. Did they take any action to actually kill or annihilate Israel? No. It was actually Arab nations who attacked Israel to annihilate, right? So that's a distinction between the empty threats and actions. But you asked the question why Iran, as a rich oil country, why did they need to go and seek nuclear program? It goes back to 20 years ago, or even more than that, when Iran was fighting in an endless war with Iraq. It took 8 years, and all their resources were gone. So they couldn't fight anymore. So they were seeking any other opportunity that they could seek to make sure they win the war, right? So they started a program during all the sanctions like 25 years ago. But after the completion of the war, they realized that they don't need it But Iran wants to maintain its national pride of having the technology. So what they do, they want to develop the capability of having the technology. In fact, during the Shah's regime, Iran purchased a nuclear facility, but it was never delivered, right? So they had bought and paid for it, never delivered. Iran is one of the shareholders of the biggest uranium enrichment facility in France. It's a shareholder. They refuse to give their uranium to Iran. So Iran has a research nuclear facility to develop nuclear medicine to treat cancer patients or to use it for agricultural research and programs. So for that nuclear research, how do you call it? Power plant, they refuse to provide the fuel to Iran to refuel that facility. Right? So they reached to a point that nobody is supporting us. We are a member of IAEA, so we have the right, like any other nation, to have access to peaceful nuclear program and facilities and uranium. But they refuse to give us the know-how. They refuse to sell us the uranium for our existing facilities. They refuse to give us the share of the facility in France. They refuse to come and install the power plant that we had purchased during Shah's regime. So they said, why don't we do it ourselves? They started to develop the internal know-how and the technology, started from the beginning. With the help of Abdul Qadir Khan from Pakistan, they bought the first generation of the centrifuges. They did the research and development, how to operate it, how to make it better. They said how we can get the material from the mines, convert it into UF6, convert it into hexafluoride gas, put it into the centrifuges, create the enriched uranium, then how to put it in the nuclear cells to operate the nuclear. So they developed this know-how, and it's a matter of national pride for Iranians in the conditions that they will refuse to be given the same peaceful technology. That's why they did that, because nobody else gave them this technology. It was their own right as per the NPT, as per IAEA.
Thank you. I believe this gentleman, you had something to add?
Okay, since the 1500s, probably the Western and European, well, the European world at the time realized that the bitter rivalry between the Shia and the Shiites always could play into their hands and benefit the European culture. Ever since then, they have always been working to undermine either the Shia or the Shiites so that they can use it to their advantage. Did both of these Muslim cultures realize that the European and Western world are constantly using this against them? And are they doing anything to fight back against that, or at least eliminate the Western influence into their culture so that they can become stronger and continue on with, what they're doing?
Thank you.
I don't think they're realizing that. That's their identity. If you, for example, get a clergy from Sunnis or Shias, if you take what they believe in, you're taking their identity, and they're not ready for that. So even if they realize that this whole game was invented or encouraged by Europeans, even if they realize that, I personally don't think they are in a position or they are ready yet to forget about their identity and lose whatever they have gained by having this identity. They are in the power because of that identity. If you take it, they're off the power and they're not ready to lose that.
No.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Well, normally this would be where we thank our speakers and give them a certificate of appreciation. Unfortunately, I didn't get those from my partner before he left the country, so we will be sending those to you, gentlemen. They're there, they're done. They're in his office. I just didn't get them. So next week, our debate is supposed to be not a debate, but a forum, and it is plight of the Native woman. Is it real? We have 3 beautiful Native ladies who wish to share their story. One of them, unfortunately, is not able to make it due to family issues. We're hoping our other two will be able to make it this time. We've been rained out twice already with that one. So good luck for us next week. And we'll thank everybody for coming out. I apologize, I also do not have any music today, but we will have it next week. If anyone has any questions, want some information about Speaker's Corner, I do have something printed up where you can go and check out our sites to find out what our upcoming events are. And I will be here, so please feel free to come talk to me. Thank you. And I'd like to say thank you to Mohammed, our videographer, who is in the opposite side of the limelight, but he does a lot of good work for us and we appreciate him very much. Thank you.